One call, years of service with the police. And there was one call that I'll never forget. The shift started like any other, 9 p.m. start, and I was in for the long run. It was a cold Monday night, so I expected a relatively quiet shift. After the evening briefing, I grabbed a set of car keys and loaded up the boot with my gear. Our team was low on numbers, so I was single crewed for the evening. I was happy about that, though. I always preferred to be on my own. I found I always had to put a mask up around others, but on my own, I could finally be myself. I don't know why, but being on my own always put me at ease. Maybe it was because I felt that my heart wasn't in the job anymore. When I started this job, I felt like a hero, like I could really make a difference. Now I just felt like a number on a spreadsheet, a zombie, just clocking in and out, counting down the hours until I can go home. The time went by soul-crushingly slowly as I aimlessly drove the dark, quiet streets. My eyes started feeling heavier and heavier, and as 3 a.m. rolled around, it was always a time where I would have to fight just to stay awake. I was so tired, I even thought about pulling into a quiet spot and having a quick power nap when all of a sudden, I was jolted awake by a call over my radio. Yankee Bravo 26. It startled me. I didn't realize I had the radio on full volume. I grabbed it and answered. Yankee Bravo 26, go ahead, I said, eager to get started. The control room operator explained that there'd been a silent 999 call and told me all the necessary information for me to reach where the call was coming from. These calls were usually nothing to worry about. 9 times out of 10, they would be accidental pocket dials. So I made my way to the address the call was coming from, and when I got there, a wave of disappointment came over me. It was a block of flats. I called the control room for more information, but all they could tell me was that the call came from this address. I got out of my car and had a look around the building. It was huge. There must have been at least 50 tenants in there. I checked if I could see any lights on from outside, but it was to no avail. I knew what I had to do. I would have to enter and knock door to door to find exactly who called us. I sighed deeply and walked towards the front of the building. I expected the door to be locked, but when I put my hand to it, it opened with a loud creak. I stepped into a long, black hallway and let the door slam shut behind me with a bang that echoed down the dark corridor. Suddenly, I was plunged into complete darkness. I took my torch out and clicked it on. It came on with a flicker that dimly lit the hallway. I could now just about see. At the end, there was a flight of stairs. I looked around for a moment to see if there was a light switch. There was. Thank God, I whispered to myself. I tried the switch, which resulted in a pop as the bulb blew out, slightly startling me. All I had now was my torch to light the way, and slowly I made my way forward to the flight of stairs ahead of me. When I reached the top, another long, pitch-black corridor greeted me. This one, however, had doors on either side. I shone my torch over them. They looked old, with paint crumbling off all of them. I looked down and noticed for the first time how dirty the floor looked, and that wasn't the worst of it. There was a terrible stench in the air. It was awful. It smelled like a dead animal or rotting food. There were always places you visited as a police officer where you would wipe your feet on the way out, and this was one of them. There were stains all over the carpet, deep, black stains. At that point, I reminded myself that someone most likely just called us by accident, and all I needed to do was make sure everyone was okay. So, I started to knock on all of the doors. The first few times I knocked on different doors, there were no answers from anyone. I didn't want to force entry into any of the flats. If I'm being completely honest, I didn't want the hassle of the paperwork. I carried on knocking on other doors when I heard a faint noise coming from above me. It sounded like furniture being scraped along the floor. Now I knew someone was here. I climbed up the next flight of stairs and made my way to the flat from which I believed the noise was coming from. When I got to the next level, I could see a small line of light emitting from under one of the doors. I made my way over and knocked loudly. "Hello, police, could you come to the door, please?" I said with as much authority as I could. I could hear rustling from the other side before suddenly the door began to slowly creak open. I found myself looking at an old, thin man. I could only see a part of his face as he peered around the half-open door. He was incredibly gaunt in the face and had a long, disheveled beard. "We've had a 999 call from this address, just making sure everything's okay, sir." He didn't answer me at first. His wide eyes were peering down the hallway like he was looking for something. "Everything's fine," he whispered. "You should leave." "Why?" I asked, confused. The old man pushed the door shut in my face, and the light from under the door disappeared. I was left confused and unable to react. I couldn't explain why, but at this moment, I began to feel a sense of unease. Was I in danger here? All I knew was that I still needed to find whoever made that 999 call, accidental or not. I collected myself once again and continued my efforts in going door to door. I was still met with nothing but silence, and when making my way through the building, the putrid smell only got worse. As the smell became more powerful, I realized it was something I recognized. It was the smell of death. Any police officer will tell you that smell is instantly recognizable the moment it hits your nose. I felt a pit in my stomach. I'd seen death before, but I hadn't prepared myself for it tonight. I grabbed my radio to call for backup, but was met with indifference. All other police officers were at emergency calls. Frustrated, I continued to follow my nose and find the source of the foul smell. As I climbed up yet another set of stairs, the pit in my stomach grew, and so did the foul stench in the air when, without warning, I heard a quiet whimper. It sounded like someone was crying and trying to stifle it as best they could. I admit I was scared now. I could feel my heartbeat in my mouth and the sweat begin to make its way slowly down my forehead. The quiet whimpering continued. "Who's there?" I called out, with a slight nervous crack in my voice. The crying suddenly stopped and left me in complete silence. I stood completely still for the longest time, listening out for any more noises. All I could hear now was the occasional whistle of wind coming from outside. I pointed my torch in front of me, and what I saw terrified me. Black stains everywhere, all over the walls and the floor. The way the stains were formed, I knew it had to be blood. I grabbed for my radio once more, and my heart sank. My radio was dead, and my spare battery was in my car. "Shit," I whispered to myself. In my tiredness, I had got seriously complacent. I turned around to face the stairwell, and I was just about to make a run for it back to my car when there was another sound. Heavy breathing coming from behind me. It was only just loud enough for me to hear it. I quickly turned around, shining my light down the hallway. The breathing stopped, however, and I noticed that one of the doors was opened. It wasn't before. Someone must have opened it while my back was turned. Every fiber in my body was telling me that I should turn around and get back to my car, but a part of me had to know what was in there. I unclipped my baton from my belt and extended it. There are no guns in this country, so all I had to defend myself was my baton and standard-issue pepper spray. I came to the open door, and the smell was unbearable. I knew it was coming from this room, and as I stepped inside the flat, I found a light switch next to me and flicked it on. I'll never forget what I saw. There was blood everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, and more bodies than I'd ever seen in my life. They were all naked and strung up like pigs in a slaughterhouse. They were emaciated and pale gray. Some looked as if they'd been there for months, and some looked like they'd only just been strung up. My breath quickened as I slowly backed out of the flat into the corridor. Suddenly, I heard the sound of someone laughing. It was an incredibly low pitch, almost sounded edited. I couldn't pinpoint where exactly it was coming from, but it was getting louder and louder, finally causing me to lose my nerve. I broke out into a sprint, making my way as fast as I could down the Val.